In this lecture, we are going to learn the 20 best practices for the test case writing in Tosca. So this is required when you are working in a multi-user repository, and where you have to make sure that you follow the best practices while writing the test case. So let's start with the one by one. Okay, so the first best practice or best practice for the test case writing is you have to make sure that you are writing your test case in the below structure. Like, you have a precondition, then the process, then the post condition. See the green check, it has the precondition which tells you to run the test to run this particular test case, which kind of preconditions you require, and then the process where the actual test case execution is going on, and then the post condition where you just clear the buffers and close the website kind of steps you add. So this is, you have to make sure that you must using these structures while writing the test case. If I'll show you the example of it, you can see this is a product folder in which we have a test case of search the web shop for a smartphone. See here, it has a prerequisite content and the post requisites folder structure. In the prerequisite, if you can see, it has the prerequisite to execute this test case, like the open application and login and register. So this is the precondition. Then search for the web shop for a smartphone is actual execution is going on in this content or process folder. And after the proper execution and validation of your test case, then in a post condition you can log out your application, clear the buffers, kind of things you can add over here. And the second best practice is every test case has a valid verification or a part of business test case. So while writing the test case, you have to make sure that you are considering at least one validation approach in your test case. For example, if I'll show you, so see, this is the search for product application is there in a workflow. There is a validation steps are there in test case. So you have to make sure that at least you are having one validation parameter in your steps. Then use the proper work state for test cases. So while working in a multi-user repository, you have to make sure that you are using the correct work state over here. Let's suppose you have planned for something, then keep it in a plan stage. But if your work is started and you are in between of your sprint or in between of your test case creation, make this as a in work. And when you are done with this, when you have executed it properly, then make it in a completed state. So this is the work state. You have to make sure you are following this approach also. And the fourth one is the test steps are renamed to match the action taken in the test steps. So if you look at the left side, after the shopping cart, it's a little bit confusing that check out the billing address, check out the shipping address. So you have to make sure that you are modifying it in a more structured way, like this all checkout things you can mention in a shopping. Then the this shopping cart and things you can mention in a shopping cart folder. Like that, you can further make the structure of your test case. If I'll show you how. See, in my this test case, the search for the web shop for a smartphone, it has a prerequisite, it has a content, and it also again classified into two more folders, that is open the application and register and login. So likewise, we also have the folder structure in content. The first folder structure is search for the web shop for a smartphone, and add it into a shopping cart. So this is I have made it more structure instead of writing these steps as a combined. So it will be easily maintainable and easily understandable that you have created this folder for this group of steps. So like that also you can use this best practice to enhance your test case writing. So if any new guy come in your team, then he or she will be able to understand your uh, test case scope by just seeing this folder structures. And the next one is the fifth one is the avoid using static weights. So this is mostly required when your application is having too much of the static weights. Then the execution time for your test case execution will increase. uh, Along with that, so you have to make sure that you are not using the static weights over there. Instead of using the static weights, you can use the dynamic weights. That is the weight on something some kind of property of any element, like if this element is not visible, if this element was not clickable, not enabled, till then wait. If it is visible or enable or clickable, then just go move forward. No need to wait for the further. So that is why we are avoiding the static weight. See here in the green check also we are using the wait on. So it will when this element is visible, it will move further. Then the sixth one is the group test step in folder. So this is this is again the fourth step that we were discussing. So make it your test cases are more structural way. Combine the test steps if they are if there are a number of steps for this for the particular thing, then you can combine those steps into one folder. Optimize the uses of condition statement and only use if and if statements if unavoidable. So this is the best practice, that you are supposed to not use if and else condition if it is not required for your test case writing. Let's suppose if you wanted to create if and else statement for the two kind of approaches your test case is having. So instead of using the if and else thing, you can just use the TCD over there. So I'll explain this test case design in our upcoming lectures, that how you can use this test case design approach to create multiple test cases instead of writing the if else in a single test case. So this test case design will be enhance your test case writing. It will you just have to create it at once, and your test cases are going to be modified and created according to that. So make sure that if it is very important, and if you are you have to use the if and else condition, then only you are using it. If it can be avoidable, so please avoid it, because this will make your execution time more when you use if and else. So do not use the do while statement also. That is the same as we discussed for the if else. Create only self-contained test case, the ninth best practice. Right. So the benefit of creating the self-contained test case is you are able to run every test case independently every time when you want, without the need of running dependent test cases. So like if you have 4 test cases and the fourth test case is depend upon the upper 3 test cases, so if any of the upper 3 test cases would fail, your fourth test case is going to be failed. So we have to make sure that we are creating these test cases in a way that these all 4 test cases are not dependent with each other. If anyone fails, the other test case is always going to run. It's not a dependent kind of thing. You have to make sure that your test cases are independent. This can be done if you have using any buffer from the previous test case to your current test case. Then you can just clear the buffers after each and every test case execution, so that next test case would have the new buffer. So 10th best practice is only create the test cases with the more than one test steps. So make sure that you are creating a test case for more than one steps. This is more likely, instead of validating the functional thing, whether this page is present or not for this URL, you can go with the end-to-end approach or user acceptance approach. Like if this page is open, user is able to log in, user is able to view the login screen, user is able to view the register screen. So that's why you can create multiple test steps in your test case. So 11th best practice is make use of repetition property. So if in your test case execution you require to run steps for the multiple times, so it's a best practice that you use the repetition property instead of copy and paste that steps again and again. If I'll show you how we are having it. So this is a test case. See here in the test case, if I'll just minimize the property. So in a work state, when you click right over there, there is a column chooser pop-up is there, and select on this column chooser, and this thing will open this small window. Here you can find out more columns for your test case, like the action properties, additional info, break condition kind of thing, image if you have path. So in that there is a repetition folder is also there, so you can click over there, and this repetition would come over here. So here you can add the repetition for your test steps into this folder. So 12th best practice is avoid the keyboard and mouse simulation. So this is we mostly do for to improve the execution speed. So instead of using the click, we can we just use the X in input. So this is also one of the best practices we have. The 13 best practice in test cases, give all test case unique name. So this is this is we mainly require when you are working in a project, and you have to make sure that each test cases are based on whatever the story acceptance criteria are, whatever its feature number are. So you have to make sure that your each test cases are gives you an unique meaning. It should be like when you are executing for the test cases for login, register, and send mail. So you have to make sure that give the name properly, so that one can easily able to identify by just seeing the name. Okay, this test case is for this one, and this test case is for this one. 14th is the link values using the drag and drop. So this is I'll cover in the test case design section, but for now you have to make sure if you are having any test case design for your test steps, then make sure that you are doing the drag and drop, so that you are having reference between these two, your test steps and test case design is more unique and more transparent. Create the conditions using drag and drop. So instead of using the if and else condition, you can just use this test case design condition. We'll show you in the upcoming lecture how you can create the conditions using test case design. Always link a test sheet to a template and create a template instance. So this is when you when you add any test case design test sheet to your test case. This is how in a schema name you can able to identify, okay, which test sheet is associated with my test case. And after when you link that test sheet with your test case, just go for the template instantiation, and in the template instantiation you can create the multiple test cases by just linking your test sheet with that test case. So let's suppose your test sheet is having you having the four kind of user. One is admin user, one is the local user, one is the user who is having just a read privilege, one is one user who is having just a read and write privilege. So these four kind of user is you can mention in a test sheet, and when you just have to create one test case for like login to the application. Sync that test sheet user credentials with your test case and instantiate your test case. You are going to see that there are four kind of test cases are created: one for the admin user, one for the read and write access, one for the local user, one for the read user. So this kind of way, by just creating one test case and linking your test case design with the test case, you can create the multiple test cases. You can see below that it has a template instance for create the automobile code, and it is having 5 test cases. That means we are having the five attributes in our test sheet. So 17th best practice is only make the changes in the template. So instead of making the changes in your test case after the template instantiation, go and change the things in your template, and then re-instantiate the your instance, and your test cases is going to update. So this is we require for the if you are doing the modification of your test cases which are linked with the test sheet. Make the use of recovery scenario. This is the most important thing we need while working on on any web page, on any application. There might be a chance that you face any kind of pop-up, any kind of errors, or any kind of exception which will which will bypass your test case execution. So at that moment of time, for to handle these unexpected behaviors on your executing of your test cases, you have to make sure that you are having the recovery scenario. And these recovery scenario you can edit at your test level, or your test case level, or project level also. If I'll show you how we can create and how we can use it. See in here I'm having the recovery scenario. This recovery scenario is for the this recovery scenario I'm having it is having the cleanup scenario. And in this it is if let's suppose you have to open any application, but what if the application is already logged in by an user? So at that time you are unable to find the login button. At that moment of time we need this recovery scenario to first log out the application and start as a new. So this is what this recovery scenario is doing. You can create it at the project level, and here in you can also see in the folders we have created the recovery scenario for the logout, and these close the Internet Explorer. And one more thing, whenever you are creating this recovery scenario, it is only going to work in actual execution state. It will not work in a scratch book. So you have to make sure while using it that if you wanted to check it, then just run it once at execution level, so that you can able to find out, okay, this is working fine or not. In the upcoming lecture, I'll while creating the proper test cases, I'll show you that how we can create the recovery scenario for your web page and for your website. The 19th best practice is implement the cleanup scenario. Just I have shown you under the recovery scenario you can implement the cleanup scenario. And the use of the appropriate retry label and the recovery scenario. This is also we can use in the recovery scenario, when you just select the recovery scenario, or in the property section, we can use it. I'll show you where it was. Okay, it was at the retrial. And here if you go to the recovery scenario, in this recovery scenario, uh, if you click over there, there is a retry level is there. So you can set this retry level to your test case level, to your test step level, or to your test step value level, wherever you want to execute this recovery scenario, wherever you think that there might be an exception, or this unexpected behavior may happen with your website, then you can set the retry level at that recovery scenario. Okay, so this is it. This is all we have for this 20 best practices of test case execution. Make sure that whenever you are working in a multi-user environment, like in your project and on actual work, you must follow these standards.